The next speaker is Lorenzo Banchero, the President Banchero Costa, and he will speak on an attempt not to depict a bleak future in shipping. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Ugo has taken a lot of my speech, but I didn't want to talk about figures. As an old man, I better talk about the past because we have difficulties in assessing the future. Circumstances at my time were very different from today. It was an easy world. We had two economic ideas, capitalism and communism. The money was US dollar. There was no need to hedge. Nowadays, communists are talking about the advantages of the free markets, and capitalists are talking about socializing their profit. The world has been set free without agreed common rules. However, I will attempt to talk about the future, and possibly in a way that I do not depict shipping as bleak as it is today. Vediamo se... Yes. Admittedly, we have a big fleet in the water and a big order book. The bulk carriers to come are about 1,500. The tankers are about 800. Containers are about 500, and the gas carrier are about 370. I don't need to talk about the market because many of you know it. When we are talking about shipping, we have to decide whether we want a free market and an open market or a regulated market. If we continue to choose the free market, then excesses are part of the game. So we cannot complain because there are too many ships. How we will get rid of the ships, I leave it to somebody else. The world, unforeseen circumstances accepted, particularly political circumstances in China, is on the march and probably going at a faster pace in the not too distant future. My main reasoning is based on bulk commodities because the dry bulk market is where I earned my first salary. But general commerce are relative to all the other segments of shipping as they relate to developments of the major countries of the world today. So, Ugo was talking about China, and it is something which he has already mentioned. We are talking about slowdown in China, but if my figures are correct, in 2006, the net growth, the net growth of China was 1.1 trillion yuan. In 2014 is 1.3. So much more than in 2006. China still has a number of achievements to do because I was just I was just going through their railways system compared to the railways system of the major countries in the world. And as you will see there, they are still far away from the European or the Japanese market. And even with India, they are loser. So railways, highways will still be there. Cosa ho fatto? Solito casino. So the roads and the highways are still well below world standard. We can still expect with ups and downs that they will prosper. Ugo Salerno has given you some ideas about India, and I also feel that Mr. Modi, even if often talks about new developments, local circumstances probably do not allow him to go as fast as China. But even at a lower path, India will be with us for the next future. And they still have to do massive developments with billions of people on the move. Even if we often read that the British presence in India has developed their railways, India is still far away from international standards, not to talk about their roads. So Ugo was talking about consumption, I'm talking about structure. The two things add to create a better world. Obviously, castes and religions will hinder India development, but many highly educated Indians are now very frequently employed by international companies at top level around the world with great success. So, sorry. So soon they may devote their intelligence to their country, and the country will also mentally change. Statistics are underlying underlying growth in China, also with imports and exports. And therefore we can expect them to help shipping. We are talking, come faccio? Okay. Africa. We are talking very little about Africa, but more than 1 billion people have apparently started moving. There are about 990 million people on the sub-Saharan area. And you have here a slide which I hope you can see. Just as a general idea, you will see that the lines are going up by 100%, 200%, 700%. So even if they start at a low basis in year 2000, they are also moving faster, and there are strong signs of development, particularly since China decided not to give them money, but infrastructures, also using and teaching local people to work. In the past, the world was sending money to Africa, which leaders were quickly using for their own benefit. If the information we get are correct, Chinese people are now using local workers and teach them to work instead of them waiting for state help. I have taken the second slide cutting out a number of countries, just to give you the idea of how they grow importantly. Obviously, as I mentioned before, their base is in year 2000 very small. Of course, Africa does not only need infrastructure, roads, and consumption, but as the president of the Bank of Nigeria was mentioning in his recent book, not only infrastructures are important, but among others, the banking system has to extend and reach a larger share of people. The number of bank branches per capita in Africa is less than 1/3 of the developed world. You see also in the ports that the lines are going up. I'm not talking very much about Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, and Egypt, because we read a lot about these countries every day. The United States seem already on the right path, and Europe is expected to follow soon. I did not mention many other countries like Southeast Asia, South America, Russia, the Arabian countries. I could bother you with additional figures on their economics, but let me say that it does not seem that the communist ideals will soon go back to them. Development and better life are well in many of their minds. Back to shipping. I remember the massive laid-up tonnage in some of the past bad times, which does not appear to be the case now. You realized I have not used the word "not yet" now. So, I'm getting close to the conclusion. I started my short speech today by talking about the future, but I am an old man and I would like to finish by mentioning the past. Ship prices today are reasonably low and opportunities of investment could soon be appealing, particularly if the old saying, let somebody else earn the last 10% is taken into account. I often go back to my initial period in shipping in the 50s and 60s, and today we are talking about shipping. But when, as a young broker in Genoa, at that time, I could speak with more than 30 ship owners. Nowadays, probably I would have difficulties in calling 2 ship owners. Ship owning is a job our owners know very well, and it is a pity that the development of bulk tramp shipping in Italy has almost faded away, but I could say the same in containers and tankers, except for some outstanding company like the one of Cesare and Paolo D'Amico. Ship owning has changed since the 60s and the 50s, but the present generation should be reminded, I'm talking about the Italians, that in the 50s and the 60s, the carature, which were pieces of paper giving shares of ships to investors, were very common with many Italian ship owners during my early days in shipping. So there was a ship owner and then a number of investors. From January, am I too long? From January 2010 to October 14, 19 new shipping companies were quoted in New York, and they got about $4.4 billion in capital. 29% were dry bulk. Additionally, $15.8 billion were raised through capital increase. In New York, the New York two markets have 59 shipping companies, and their total value is about $45 billion. $45 billion. But this is only 0.2% of the total market. So shipping on a big market like New York is only counting for 0.2%. Jefferies has reported that in the world of the non-quoted companies, between October 2008 and 2014, a further $10 billion was raised. So a lot of money was raised from New York, mainly from private investment funds and so on. The drawback of these investments is that very seldom you hear about transportation. And very often you hear about capital gain. So what will happen when all this money decides to get out of shipping? I leave it to the next generation. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Banchero. I think as 2 years I'm aiming to have you here, speaking here, and now that you have done it, I think, so well, and your considerations are always so deep and go to really to the structure of the business. I suspect that you will have to do it again for many years, because otherwise the conference will miss one of its highlights. Thank you for these words.